Look at it. Oh, the rat. I don't know if that rat would have made it in the trenches. Have you seen the flamingo here? Have you noticed that? It's from the Galapagos Islands. It says Galapagos on it. From the roof. Okay. So, just to review, what was the court case that said the Espionage Act of the Constitution? Yep, Schenck versus the US. What or what person, head of the Socialist Party, would be arrested for speaking out against the war, run for president from a jail cell? G. Debs. And what else we did yesterday? Oh, the 19th Amendment would allow for what? Yeah, women's suffrage. And what was the last state to ratify? Yeah, Tennessee. Who was the leader of the suffragette movement who would become the leader who demanded direct action? Yeah, Alice Paul. It was Susan B. Anthony amendment. She passed away before that, but Alice Paul, who wanted more direct action than Anthony wanted. And what was the other reform used as a wartime effort? 18th Amendment, which led to prohibition. What was the flu? Spanish flu. And what age group? That's why it's such an amazing time. All this stuff is happening during the war and all these dramatic shifts. And we saw one more big one, which I'll cover at the end of the war just because it'll fit in. The world was changing so fast. Let's get to the 14 points. So arms reduction. And that one, yeah, if the countries, when they built up arms, there was such a desire to use them, and military became a position or a military force, an attack became a tool of diplomacy. We can't really do anything diplomatically, so let's just attack. I wonder if that sounds familiar to them. We are very much doing that now. And then, and it will backfire, it might be already. Open diplomacy. All those secret agreements, like all the promises made to Italy, or all the promises made before the war, if it was done with transparency, that might avoid the war. And there's an element of truth, but of course, secrecy are what diplomats want. Okay, it allows them to talk and make, and not be influenced or swayed by outside forces, but also secrecy gives you power. Somebody knows something about you. They have something over you, especially if you don't know what it is. Secrecy is power. Next, self-determination. That people decide their own fates. So they have everything from division of Austria-Hungary into the states, division of the Balkan boundaries, independent Poland, all those areas that demanded national identification. And those three basic elements, you could see how those would be so desired by people. But here's the biggie, and this has been talked about for years. And this has been talked about since the Napoleonic era, a League of Nations, an organization of states that could come together and stop war before it happened. And this would be an element of, and please write this down, what they're going to begin to call liberal foreign policy. Liberal foreign policy. Diplomacy and working together over war. I'll explain it more on Monday. But liberal foreign policy. The idea was we could stop it before war, and peaceful countries who want peace, will deter warlike countries, will deter aggression, because the nations of the world will say, we want peace, we demand it, and aggression will be punished by us. It will deter it. That's what they hoped. Those of you who read in history might know what's going to happen to the League of Nations. But this is mostly symbolic. People love the idea of the 14 points, but they never really read the 14 points. It became like a slogan for a political campaign. When Wilson arrived in London before he went to Paris to negotiate the peace treaty, which, by the way, Wilson will be the first American president to leave the borders of the United States while in office. Went to London before he got to Paris. He was met by over 1 million people cheering him on because they thought the 14 points would bring us a better world. Should have when he left 6 months later, he had to leave in the middle of it. It's kind of changed quickly. So it became symbolic. It was also incredibly naive. He didn't really understand all the political issues. Sure, break up the Austria, but they have all these different groups living with each other. So you had different Slavic groups, ethnic groups living together, Hungarians, people who are German, and a large population of Jews all together. Are they each going to have their own country? And the Allies are going to look at this and say, no, we're not going to do this. We didn't fight this war to allow our colonies to break up. It never really understood. And in fact, it's never thought about it. Are the colonies going to have self-determination, including the Philippines? No way. Central Europe is too confusing. The political reality just didn't meet. He would make a revision of it, but the 14 points was symbolic, but it was never really going to be a position to end the war, and would give Wilson kind of a black eye after the effect of it. So, and this is him as Don Quixote tilting at windmills. So, it's going to take a while, but the United States will begin to send forces. Remember, the U.S. Army is tiny. It took Britain until 1916. The U.S. won't be ready until August of 1918 for large numbers of forces. The first American forces will arrive in 1917. They'll be called the American Expeditionary Force. And the guy who chased Pancho Villa around, John Blackjack Pershing, right here, there he is in Mexico, would be the overall commander of U.S. forces. And he's going to be the highest ranking U.S. general in history. They're going to give him the equivalent of 6 stars. The only one. And these are American forces arriving, the first ones. The nickname for U.S. soldiers in World War I were called doughboys. Doughboys. It probably comes from the Mexican War. Something about dusty U.S. forces looking like adobe buildings. But we're not 100% sure. But doughboys. You ever heard doughboys? That's just an American soldier. Anybody know what the nickname for American soldiers from World War II would be? Then they still sometimes say doughboys, but it's going to be something else. They're the one calls from the military, aka the government. Those are government issue. Yeah. Yeah, GI. And then GI, and then Joe is just a common name. GIs meant that was the US soldiers in World War II. GIs. Yeah. That's government issue. Government issue. Mm-hmm. So it's going to take a while. One thing Sherman did, though, or sorry, one thing Pershing did, when he first got there, the British and French were like, oh, look at all these fresh soldiers. Let's plug them into our units. Because we're running out of men. And Pershing said, no. American units will fight, or American soldiers will fight in American units. American companies, American battalions, regiments, divisions. So it would take longer, but it was the right move. You don't want a bunch of different languages speaking one unit. But the Allies are going to be mad about this. But what about the Germans? So this is going into the end of 1917, the first troops arrive. They know they still got a lot of time, almost a year, for American forces. The Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, who surrendered? What country? Russia. Russia surrendered to Germany. All those troops, or at least most of the troops, the youngest and fittest troops on the Russian front for the German can be sent to the Western front. They have a window right now to attack. And this will be called either the Kaiser's offensive or just simply the spring offensive. Hindenburg, the camp commander, right here, Kaiser, Ludendorff, rolled the die. One big attack before the Americans entered. That's why the Allies intervened, because they were fearful of this attack. And they had been learning for years of war. 1916, the Germans learned so much. 1917, new German tactics just about knocked Italy out of the war. They just didn't have enough men. Now they're going to do it on a broad scale. Use specially trained soldiers to attack, not in the mass wave attacks that cause so many casualties, but in small groups, infiltrating the enemy, avoiding strong points, and getting to the rear, causing trouble. And they had a name for these troops. Sometimes you might hear them called shock troops, but they called them the specially trained troops. Anyone know? Stormtroopers. And yes, I found Lego stormtroopers. And I'm just thinking, of course, Lego stormtroopers. What were they? Okay, fit young men they were trained to fight in small groups. So they would show initiative, they would attack on their own, they would make decisions at that point, not have to be led from the rear, so they were really flexible. They would be equipped with rifles, bags of grenades, brand new handheld machine guns called submachine guns, flamethrowers, rocket-fired grenades. I mean, firepower and attack. Here are stormtroopers, and you can see all the grenades are holding, and a couple of them have bags with even more grenades for firepower. They would advance over the line, avoid strong points. Here's a stormtrooper right here that's advancing into smoking gas, but that's sticking out of that gun. That's a rifle fire grenade that would fire from a rifle. Not very accurate, but it's firepower. And this is their plan. Just try to knock the British out. They thought they could knock the British out. Advance, drive through, knock them out. Now, they've been basically on the same line for the most part since 1914. We saw the video of the Somme and Verdun. So they're going to attack. And it worked better than anyone thought. Quick preliminary bombardment shocked the British and Canadian forces. And the British made a bunch of tactical mistakes that hurt them too. And they actually broke the stalemate. They advanced that March of 1918 and even advanced in some areas 60 miles. But there were big problems as they advanced. And the first one you could see, when they advanced, the thought was they would break through, but the line was ruined, really hard to get through. They couldn't break through. And there's cavalry ready to go, but they couldn't break through. It took them forever to get through. And because it's like this, can you get your supplies? So they outran the supplies right away. The battlefield was just a road. So they outran their supplies. Secondly, what soldiers were the first one to be killed? Especially trained stormtroopers. Well, let's get to the last one. They were told. These are stormtroopers on the advance. That is a dead French soldier. When they got to the British trenches, the British would just topple over. German soldiers and civilians back home were told the British were starving because of submarines. They were out of food. They were dying. They're reduced to eating cats and dogs. All it's going to take is one push and Britain will collapse. That's all we need. They're out of food. And what did the German soldiers find when they got to the trenches? What? Food. That's what they found. More food than they had seen from the beginning of the war. There was no shortage of food at all. They had canned food and some fresh food. They had bread. They had food the German soldiers hadn't seen since the beginning. They'd been on that starvation blockade, remember? They were running out of food. They had terrible rations. And their rations were better than the civilians back home. German soldiers had twice the calories as civilians back home. There's only about 1,500. What is that, like 2 candy bars? And they were furious. So you know what the first thing a lot of them did? They stopped and engorged them. So discipline began to break down. They just began to loot. Here's the big, that's why this is such a big deal. Their leaders have been telling them, for winning the war. The sacrifice is worth it. The British are sorry. And they found out that she was sorry. That meant the leaders were what? Lying. And that's what we got to get down. They learned, and it hit them like a Mack truck. Our leaders have been lying. And if they're lying about something as big as this, what else have they been lying about? And it's going to take a while, but this will begin to corrode the German army and will get back home. Our leaders have been lying this whole time. Why are we fighting against them? What else? The discipline began to break down. Not immediately, but it began to break down. Then they advanced, but because of supply issues, they ran out of steam. They tried a few more attacks, actually 4 more. Each time they broke through, but they never really got the full breakthrough that knocked the Allies out. They would always run out of supplies and have to stop. And the Allies finally did something that they should have done years ago. They picked a supreme commander. So the highest ranking general in European armies is a field marshal. So it's Field Marshal Ferdinand Foch, or Marshal Foch. Not a brilliant general, but very competent, determined, and understood what was necessary. Here's Foch right here. So he would lead the Allies to victory, a French general. And of course, it's going to be one of the great heroes of World War I. So, for example, these are all the commanders of the Allied armies. Right here's Pershing, the British General Haig. We have a French overall commander, then the commander of the actual French army, Marshal Pétain, things like that. And so he organized the defense to stop the offensive. And he's going to become such a big national hero in France. I mean, Foch, everyone knew him. I found this. It is a thing to get tattoos of Marshal Foch, and she did not mess around. That is her tattoo of Marshal Foch. And I know what you're thinking, and I agree. 10 points extra credit. Anyone? 11 points extra credit. I know some of you would have done it for 8. I'm sure that wouldn't hurt at all. That wasn't a long process. It doesn't hurt down here, so there's no terrible endings there. By the way, that is one more story about tattoos. It's already kind of drooping. Skin moves. And tattoos don't wash off. When you get a tattoo, don't forget. Plan for the future. It's something that will look okay when you get old. Elderly like me. So, this is as far as the Germans advanced, and they broke through. They probably should have kept trying to get to the sea to divide the British, but then they tried to take Paris. The first American forces would fight here at Chateau-Thierry. They'd just be plugged in, even though they weren't quite ready. The Americans were still taught older tactics. The casualties were incredibly high, but also the Americans fought with great bravery. And so it proved that they would fight. They just needed a lot of training, which they have to do at that time. But just a small little bit of units. It wouldn't be till the summer that large numbers of American forces. Well, Foch would organize a counterattack in August. And it was just going to be to push the Germans back to the position for the big offensive that's going to be the next spring, 1919. But the Germans began to collapse. Here's a German soldier trying to duck after a shell, and those are Americans. The first real American unit, the first American army, would fight here at Saint-Mihiel, south of Verdun. And the Germans were retreating, but the Americans did quite well there and helped with the Germans retreating. My great-great-uncle died. So when my wife and I we went to Verdun, we went to Saint-Mihiel and found this. And so, just part of the case. One thing about this, though, Verdun, it's south of Verdun. So there's massive cemeteries for both American, for both French and British, French and German. But there's also 2 huge American cemeteries that the French keep. It's amazing. The honor that French gave to American, or even the German soldiers. But one thing about Verdun, I mentioned to you when we watched that video, that is the most hallowed ground in France. That is the most important battle. And people go there, it's a pilgrimage. Boston Vanilles is their military academy. Every military academy in the world copies the French military academy. That's one copies the French. And they graduated. And when my wife and I were there, the entire freshman class, their military academy was there on the parade ground in front of the big, just all these young French men and women from their military academy. And also at the same time, there were a bunch of German officers who were there from their military academy touring the battle. It's kind of weird. But it is one of the most amazing places I've ever seen. They have an ossarium, which is kind of a big mausoleum with a number of dead soldiers. Has been the bones they couldn't identify, which is the bones of over 15,000 years. You find people regularly. It is incredible. And so when my wife and I went, it's French. It's still French place. And one thing I still can't believe. It also tells you why I'm such a believer in traveling the world. I know it's expensive. My wife and I are frugal. That's how we do it. But travel the world and see other people, other cultures. I can't even begin to tell you. Treatment by French. So nice. It was overwhelming. And that's why when people say that France don't treat tourists very well, look at them like they're insane. Clearly, it's people who say that have never been. Or they're jerks. And they're so nice. I still can't. It was nice everywhere, but when we're done, it was unreal. Because we're Americans, you know, in that spot. And let me tell you something. Every place you go, France, I would say, especially, try to speak a little French. My wife speaks French pretty well, so we had a big advantage. It's incredible how nice they were. To give you an idea how nice they were, but also just how nice people are around me. We're there, we stayed in a little pension, kind of a bed and breakfast. And they had a little restaurant there. We breakfast there, we had catered one dinner for a couple of things. And they were so nice. So it was great. And really nice place. And when we left, we were going into Belgium. Yeah, Belgium. I remember our trip. We didn't find out till we got home. They ripped up the check. They paid for it. They paid for it. It's unreal. And that, that's over the top. So they did that, and I will be clear about it. I'm sure it was all my wife's doing, but no, they were very nice. And the amazing thing is, that's happened to us twice. It happened in Britain too. With these people we met, this little bed and breakfast paid for us, and we didn't find out until we got home. They paid our entire check. Just the peanuts. So people are amazing everywhere. It also shows you why they don't want you fraternizing with the enemy. Because you find out that we're just, hey, people are nice. We're done with this one. So after the beginning of the August offensive, Foch moved the American forces to the Argonne Forest. It wasn't the most important battle, but it was the southern flank of the American attack, or the Allied attack. And it was heavily forested, but you can see what's left of the forest after the shelling. And it was brutal, awful fighting. Thousands of Americans were going to die in the Argonne Forest. This will be the experience of most American soldiers in World War I, will be the Argonne. And yes, I had another relative who fought there. My wife had a few relatives who fought in the Argonne. They survived. But to give you an idea of the brutality of the fight, almost all fighting the Americans would do would be from August until November of 1918, under 20,000 Americans. And for one person killed, there's 5 or 6 people wounded. Today it's about 10 people. That should give you the idea of the brutality of the fight. Well, the German army, the morale was collapsing because I told you why. All these the sacrifices they made, and they've been lying to us. And in September, the army would just collapse. One day, over 20,000 Germans just surrendered. Look at the sea of German soldiers. They just had enough. What are we fighting for? Here are American soldiers looking at Germans, surrender Germans, or Germans turning to the French. Ludendorff lost his nerve, had a complete mental breakdown. He was kind of the brain of the operation. One day he would say, the Germans have got to have an armistice, ceasefire, we got to quit. The next day he said we could still win the war. His stepson, who he was very close to, was an officer in reform, died in August of 1918 in the front, and it broke. He kept the body with him at his headquarters. He just a total mental break. He wouldn't let the body go, which is unreal. He never really recovered. We'll mention Ludendorff one more time, but in November, Germany exploded in APUSH. It happened so fast it shocked everyone. It started in the naval yards in the north. The Navy was ordered to try to do an attack on the British fleet, and they said, no, we're done. And they mutinied, and it spread to all of these cities. Here it started and spread throughout, and by Berlin, it was in Berlin by November 6th and 7th. And the Kaiser asked the army to put it down and said, no, we're done. And he abdicated. The Kaiser ran away to the Netherlands, just showed up at the Netherlands and asked me for exile, which the Dutch took because it would end the war. And the Kaiser would end his life in the Netherlands. Would spend the rest of his life in the Netherlands. He would die in 1942. But it's ironic about 1942. And Germany conquered the Netherlands in 1940. And Hitler actually was thinking, do we bring the Kaiser back? Then he realized, no, I don't want those monarchists. So they just left him alone. The Kaiser literally spent the rest of his life chopping. Kind of like him, because he's the Kaiser. But it collapsed. A provisional government sent word by November 7th for peace. In fact, Americans heard about this and they thought the war was over. And there were massive celebrations all over the United States on November 7th. That's why November 11th was a little bit subdued. The joke was everybody was still hungover. But the armistice would finally be signed. It could have been signed the evening of the 10th. Armistice means ceasefire. So it's not a surrender. But someone on Foch's staff said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if the war ended on the dramatic 11th hour, the 11th, wouldn't that be cool? And so it ended on that day. Those are American soldiers celebrating. And General Bullock, the commander of the U.S. First Army, was really upset by this because he thought the United States should have one more big attack. And so he ordered one more time over the top to attack the German lines at 10 a.m. And so the last big American attack was when everybody knew the war was over and about. And the Germans, who were just all huddled in their trenches waiting for the end, were actually, when they could see the men coming over, started screaming at the Americans, don't come. We have to shoot. The war is over. So the last American deaths, there would be over 6,000 casualties in that last hour. The last first American soldier to die would be 5 minutes before the war. And there's a myth that the Germans did that. And that movies about it, all flying in Western Front, in this version of it. But, the Germans did not do this. So that would be the end. Then everybody fired off everything they had for the last few minutes up in the air, and then silence. And both sides kind of got up and looked at each other. And the important thing is the German army, even though they were being beaten, was not broken yet. And they smoked arms and marched on. They went home in relatively good order. But they were beaten. We'll come back to that. So the Germans would surrender this railway car here, right here, the provisional government in Compiègne Forest and Winds. And so the Germans would surrender, and the armistice, even though it's a ceasefire, in essence, it was a surrender because they had to agree to terms. But it's not a peace talk. There's not a peace treaty. Just an agreement to end the fighting with certain agreements. And where are we at here? So this is the monument after the war. You can imagine at the French have built a big monument. And this will be a source of great French pride and, of course, German humiliation. Here's another picture of that same railway car. It's a bit different. Anybody recognize those guys? Do you recognize him? That's where Hitler accepted the surrender of the French or he made him do it in that rail car for the French humiliation. And then the Germans brought the rail car back to Berlin. It was going to be part of a big monument for the great German victory in the war, which didn't happen. An Allied bombing in March of 1945 destroyed it. So that's what happened to the rail car. So originally, I was always told 9 million. I think it's closer to 14 to 15 million because they so undercounted people who died. And they undercounted partially because the flu, which devastated soldiers, but it devastated them because of the war. I mean, there's so many issues with it. But you know, when you get numbers this big, it's a slaughter beyond comprehension. And look at the numbers. It says 1,700, we think it's closer to 2.2 million Russians died, 2 million Germans, the Americans 126,000 in just a few months. Let me show you a battalion of 400 Scotsmen. They're there at Edinburgh Castle, lined up before they went to France in 1915. That's how many came home. Some units might have very few casualties, but if units were right at the front or leading the charge over the top, they might be devastated. So you have neighborhoods or towns that will be relatively unaffected, and then entire towns where all the young men are gone. Yeah. Yes. Yes. It's numbers hard to comprehend. You know, think about Montana, it's a little bit over 1 million people total. It's just hard to wrap your mind around, at least for me. And they would get a name for the group of survivors coming back, the lost generation. Because even if they weren't physically wounded, they're mentally never the same. And what a hole in the what a hole. This is the age group, 18 to 40, devastating. You're just going to have a whole demographically in Britain, France. You can imagine how these people, they'll be in their 40s when World War II began, desperate to not do it. These are German soldiers that you notice every one was missing a limb. That became one of the symbols of the war. And one of the appalling features of every war, what happens to every army. One of the features would be a veteran missing a limb, begging for money. All of the U.S. Britain, especially Germany. It's a symbol of war. Civil War in America too, begging soldiers. It would happen after World War II, of course, and 30% of all homeless people in the United States today are Americans. It is appalling what happens, to especially in those states. It's better now, you know, right now, right at this moment, the current administration is dramatically cutting the Veterans Administration. And so dramatically cutting it. So this happens after every war. I'm biased. It's appalling what happens, especially to enlisted. This is one example. Yes, it very is. But not them. They're happy. She knows something out. So, you know what this means? I'm going to give you a minute and a half. Everybody go back to the reasons the U.S. entered World War I. Remember, I went through a bunch of them. Go back and look at those reasons right now. Look at them. Have it go through them again to refresh your memory. If we got a thesis, right? It's a good thing. Right? Practice the thesis. It's a good thing. Go. Minute and a half. we ready? Quick, go through it. I gave you about 6 reasons, didn't I? Now, one of the questions we really want to get, when I mean me, I mean you, for the AP exam, is a question where it has a statement, and you have to assess the validity of it. Meaning, do you agree with it or disagree with it? Because remember, you need a why, your claim in your thesis statement. Well, this makes it easy, because assessing the validity, your why is whether or not you agree with the statement, you disagree with the statement, or you agree with part, disagree with part. That makes it easy to make a claim. So we want these. Let's have one. Assess the validity of that statement. So you're gonna write a thesis statement for a 5-paragraph essay. Yeah. No, we're just practicing. Okay. I want you to quick go through it, so you already have it. Remember, economics, that's like, trade, merchants, money, bonds. So, yes, it was to protect democracy, but you have to address policy of democracy and economic issues. You have to address that in your thesis. Good. This would be a good question. I mean, you sorry. I think I got it. Yeah. Take a position on the statement, make sure you address the issues, and you get 3 good pieces. Got address line. When you're done, go back and make sure you took a position on it, that you have an A, B, and a C. 3 topics for you, 3 body paragraphs. Right. People are finishing up. If you're done now, I think we're looking at this. That's what we're doing. Yeah, but it works. Maybe you have to start with this. Yeah, I start with it. 5 minutes. So it just for the wrong. Not necessarily, but it would be a good one despite the marks. Make it a little easier to follow. What else? We can take a quick peek. Are we still done? We got it done. Remember, I think I gave you 5. I'm sorry, 6 reasons why to do this. 2 I told you were the most important. But else want me to peek at theirs? They want me to cut it off, put it in the scrapbook. You should go scrapbook. This is more. Very good. I think we should mention this. All you have to mention about that very good. You just trust that. Despite Wilson's forever, it's something like that. Democracy, it's not. Anybody else? And I gave you very specific reasons why the U.S. entered the war. Should be done here. That's why as you go back and look at the reasons the U.S. entered the war, so it should be done. Some people not done. You gotta get past for the thesis statements. So you just get them done. It's all taking the AP exams. I wish it wasn't, but it is. All right. For those of you who are done, go in and change if someone else is done. Look at them, see if you can identify the why. Change here. I'm gonna look at Sam. I gave you 6 reasons you should have it. That's your responsibility. When you get those, it's your responsibility. I get it on my thoughts. Get it done. Now look at, you're gonna go in and exchange with somebody, look at their, make sure you can identify the why and A. The most important are the A, B, and C. And then we get a why, you're in good shape. You have to address. It was not to make the world safe for democracy, but for economic reasons, because we're all exchanging. Is that yours? I got yours back. So it was to protect farmers. Yep, you got it. Man. Anybody else? All right, we're going to look through them, and then I'll show you mine. We'll get one thing down really quick. Very good. You got A, B, and C. You address. You get a claim on mistake. If I know exactly where you're on. If we get a question like this, at least I know it's my point of view. This would be great. So all you have to do is take a stand on that statement and then go. Write down 3 things. That is the way to go. I'll look at yours, but I want to see mine really quick. Let me put up mine. Stand on it. Think about that. See, 3 paragraphs. Very good. So, you notice I address democracy, economic reasons, and here, boom, boom, boom. Yeah. Say. With World War I, World War II, and like the IWW, NAACP, that's okay. But don't abbreviate things and put down for like dem instead of democracy. Does that make sense? But for really well-known acronyms, you're okay. Yeah. So it's very good. You can do it after. The big thing is it's right there. And it can be 2 sentences. It can be 2 sentences. Wait, we got one more thing to add. I promise. One more thing to add to your notes. Would I lie to you? Yes. For all we've been through. Are you ready? One more thing. The Treaty of Versailles. And write down the big 3. The big 3 came. And the thing was, these are the French, British, and the Americans. And they all have different reasons why they want to fight, different things they want out of the peace. Different things. All right. I just want to get this part down. Hey, who used bonds on their bonds and debt on their thesis statement? Raise your hand if you use bonds. Who used Zimmerman note? Zimmerman note? Who used unrestricted submarine warfare, which was the most important reason the U.S. entered the war? Very good. Who used Belgium? Anyone use Belgium? Got one Belgium there. Anybody use trade? Trade. Very good. Who? Anybody use the Russian Revolution? What? All right. I gave you, what do we have? 6 reasons right there? All of them are pretty good ones, but the easiest ones would be, at least for me, unrestricted submarine warfare and the Zimmerman note. Now, when we do the DBQ, everyone pay attention up here. When we do the DBQ, and we pay attention up here. The DBQ, it's going to be a 4-paragraph essay. So we just need an A and a B. And that means you have to use 2 documents for your examples to prove your topic for each paragraph. 2 per body paragraph. So how many documents total do we need? Now, you'll have a little bit more time in the actual AP exam we're talking, so we get enough time for another document. Good to kind of hedge your bets, get a little bit more, but we're here for time reasons 4. And the question is going to be very similar. Statement, but it's about the reason the United States did not ratify the treaty. You've read that. I'll give you a little more detail. And that's it. All right, everybody. Enjoy your weekend. Yeah.
And they didn't have like anything yet. This mom was like, well, I'm so sick.
Oh no.
And they went to a restaurant and he's like, you're going to go get lunch, but you're going to eat first. She's like, eats like she wouldn't let him leave until she ate.
I believe it, yeah. They could tell us, oh, that's too bad your mom got. Did you get how long was she sick? This was only 1 day. Yeah. Awesome. What do we got? Marshall Floyd. I like the mustache. Very cool.